Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Mysteries and Oddities video. Alright, another entry here. This one I found online as far as a mystery that's located up north. You're looking at around the British Columbia, Washington State area specifically to see this ongoing mystery. And I say ongoing because it just started pretty recently, less than a decade or so ago, but to this day there are still new occurrences of this mystery. Very bizarre, very peculiar type stuff. That maybe there's going to be a little bit of gruesome images, not gruesome, but in the sense that it's a little bit more riskier than I usually post here, only because of the nature of this video. But what I'm talking about is the mystery known as the Severed Feet or Severed Foot Beach there in British Columbia. So very interesting stuff. Basically the concept is this: starting around a decade or so ago, for whatever reason, a consistent set of severed feet have been found in several places there in British Columbia, and then also, as I mentioned, just a few more, but also in Washington State. So I'm going to go ahead and give as much information as possible and then showcase all of the interesting theories that seem to be abound with regards to where these severed feet came from. So very, very fascinating stuff. So again, it all started around 2007 or so. Specifically, I believe the first date is August 20th, and then that's when a girl was visiting some kind of beach there in British Columbia, and when she came up to that beach, that's when she saw an Adidas type shoe and then with a sock inside. So it looked just like, not something that necessarily wasn't very perilous, just something interesting to pick up and look at. Unfortunately, though, when she actually did so, that's when she found a man's right foot actually within the shoe itself. So that started the whole trend, because cut to a couple days later, yet another right foot also from a man was found, and then cut to, let's say, the next year or so, and that's when another right foot was also found. All of these seem to be the same pattern or so, like they seem to be found just somewhere within an area close to water, almost as if, let's say, they were drifting for quite some time and then just naturally settled within a portion of that beach, and then just by pure happen chance, people coming by and then finding something to look at, they pick it up, and then that's when they find these feet. In total, there have been around, ever since it started in 2007, about 16 feet, if I'm not mistaken, and then also 4 more, so 16 in around the Canada area, and then 4 more in Washington State. The very last one was around February of this year, if you could believe it. So when I say pretty recent, it is very recent. In this case, it was February 12th, where another foot, in this case, came up in a place called Port Renfrew there in Vancouver Island. And to this very day, as far as the causes of these feet, clearly, and why they're being found, clearly the first thing that people surmise or come to mind is that there was some kind of bad circumstance, like really bad. Like you think of the usual suspects when it comes to people doing bad things with, let's say, the mafia or some other gang members or some other type of bad people. They run into some kind of debt to them, and when they can't pay, then that's when this stuff happens to them. But interestingly enough, I guess in order to make sure that let's say around that area there's not a sense of panic, not that I really think there would be, but the police were quick to jump on something like this, stating that based on all the circumstances and the evidence presented, because all these feet, they all went through rigorous examinations to try to find out, of course, if they could, the cause of death, which is kind of hard to determine because of just a tiny portion of the body, but also to determine the identity, because when that happens and they're able to identify someone, then they can start tracing a link back earlier when they were alive and then try to use that truly to see what happened, what truly caused their death. Some of the circumstances surrounding those feet and the identities found, they're pretty fascinating. Like, for example, there was one story that I was reading. There was a guy, a 21-year-old, who had been reported missing earlier, about 4 years before his foot was found in 2008. So somewhere in 2004, he was found, I guess, reported missing. So in his case, then the way that these things are determined, I mean, the shoes are analyzed. Of course, they're a very specific type of shoes, and when that happens, they can also find out where in that area maybe it could be sold, including what specific date. I mean, they get very detailed when it comes to these investigations, just using, in this case, the catalyst, the actual shoe itself. But yeah, with regards to this 21-year-old, he was reported missing, and his death was quote unquote considered not suspicious. So it gives you an example of what had happened to him. So maybe he was suicidal, or maybe he just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, either falling into the sea, hitting his head somewhere, not being found, drifting into the lake by accident, whatever. But such is the case of that example. Another one was, I was reading another story where it had to do with somehow, some way, it was found that the shoe belonged to one person. Like, if you can believe it, a family identified that shoe after it was being reported on the news. How interesting is that? Showcase of very, I guess you could call it like a common shoe on TV, and then someone will identify it. But in any case, it was found to be of an owner who was considered depressed. And so the natural summation is that this person, I guess their depression took over their entire life, and then that's when they decided to do something bad about it. And then that's when most likely they committed, in this case, suicide. So pretty interesting stuff. Also, the other theories, if you're trying to broaden the approach as to where these shoes came from or where these feet came from, there are some pretty interesting ones. I mean, this is the stuff that, let's say, normally one wouldn't think about, but when you hear about it, it starts to make sense. Like, for example, there was that tsunami incident that occurred back in 2004. And there's a theory that some of the feet that belong to these people were from the tragedy there in, I think it was the Asian tsunami. I can't remember the exact location, but that particular incident caused, in this case, all those feet all these years later to wash up, let's say, to the shores, in this case, thousands of miles away in British Columbia and, in this case, Washington. If you're wondering, well, how does that work? Don't the human bodies decompose? They do, but apparently if a body is in water, and let's say it's considered quote unquote optimal conditions, then that body can actually stay as is, almost not in pristine condition, but in manageable condition for a long time, years, and in some cases, in theory, up to 3 decades. So when you have that tsunami that occurred back in 2004, and these feet, and the way it happens is whenever the body is truly decaying, it just separates on its own. So when this happened, it was India. That's right. That's where it happened. That's the location. So when this occurred, and let's say those bodies started floating out into the sea, just by pure decay of the body, then that's when the feet separated, and then that's when they went on their little travel, in this case all the way to the other side of the world, straight towards those beaches. So that's one theory. Another theory is that also sometimes when there's those mysterious plane crashes over the ocean, I think there was a recent one just the other year or so where it was, it's still a mystery into what happened to it. It just completely almost disappeared. But those bodies, whenever they're in the water and then they start again decomposing, sure enough, the foot itself detaches just through natural decay, and then they travel for miles on end. And when that happens, that's when they also end up straight into the beaches. Of course, another theory too, as I mentioned earlier, is that in some cases these are bad circumstances, people running afoul in this case of other bad men, and so there's also that regard too to consider. But it seems like for the most part, as far as the theories surrounding it, those are all of them that seem to constitute what are the reasons for these human feet suddenly starting. One thing though that doesn't answer is why 2007? That's what I found it pretty curious. So 2006, 2005, 2004, nothing like that beforehand had these large number of feet suddenly appearing. Now this is happening. So could it be a coincidence? Could it be just something else entirely different? Who knows? But I find that to be an answer that I would like something as far as a plausible response to, considering that there's so many years beforehand where this was not happening, and all of a sudden there they are popping up there. So if anyone has any more information, someone knows, let's say if you're there near that British Columbia area near Washington State, if you've had more, I guess, information to share on that, please post those comments below. That'd be really, really good to hear. And again, this is an ongoing case of some sort, because almost every single year there have been a recurring set of feet that continue to pop up on these beaches. So be on the lookout. No doubt there's going to be more news related to this as more years pass by. Right, everybody? Thanks again as always. Take care.